Imagine building your life around someone you love, only to discover they've been hiding a web of lies and manipulation all along. I thought my marriage was perfect, but what I uncovered shattered everything. This is a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and finding the strength to walk away. Stay with me as I share how I exposed the truth, one devastating detail at a time. By the end, you'll see why this story might change the way you view relationships forever. She was brilliant, charming, and her laughter had a way of filling the room. I thought I had found my soulmate. We got married 2 years later, building a life in Boston that seemed like the dream. Little did I know, beneath her radiant smile lay secrets that would destroy everything I believed in. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint when the cracks began to form. In the beginning, everything felt like a fairy tale. Emmy had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. She'd plan elaborate dates, surprise me with heartfelt gestures, and always knew the right thing to say. We had our honeymoon in Maui, where we swam with dolphins and watched sunsets on the beach. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. For 2 years, we built a life together, weekend hikes, Friday night takeout, and movie marathons. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. But perfection is fragile. And Emmy had a darkness she kept hidden well. I started noticing small things. The way she'd snap at me for forgetting to unload the dishwasher or roll her eyes when I suggested plans with my friends. First, I brushed it off. Nobody's perfect, right? But those moments became more frequent. Her words sharper, her tone colder. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted from a client meeting that ran over. Emmy didn't greet me with her usual kiss or even a hello. Instead, she stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, her eyes like daggers. You couldn't bother to text? Do you even care about this marriage? Her accusation blindsided me. I had texted twice, but her anger didn't seem to need a reason. That was the first time I felt it, the tightening in my chest, the creeping doubt that maybe I was the one doing something wrong. I told myself it was a rough patch, something every couple goes through. But as months passed, those rough patches became the norm. And I started to wonder if the fairy tale I'd believed in was just a facade. It wasn't a single moment that woke me up. It was a series of them, subtle yet unnerving. Emmy's sharp words began to pierce deeper, and her once playful teasing started feeling more like veiled insults. One Friday night, I invited a few old friends over for dinner. Emmy wasn't thrilled about the idea but reluctantly agreed. As we sat around the table, laughing over stories from college, Emmy interjected with a pointed comment. Jack's always been the type to tell the same stories over and over. Aren't you tired of hearing them by now? The room fell silent. I forced a laugh, brushing it off, but inside, I was humiliated. My friends exchanged awkward glances, and the mood shifted. Later that night, as I cleaned up the dishes, Emmy didn't apologize. Instead, she said, "You need thicker skin if you're going to survive in this world." These moments became a pattern. She'd criticize the way I dressed, the way I worked, even the way I laughed. And yet, there were times she'd turn back into the woman I fell in love with, sweet, affectionate, and full of life. It was like living in a hurricane. Moments of calm followed by chaos. One evening, I suggested we plan a weekend getaway. I thought maybe we just needed time to reconnect. But Emmy dismissed the idea with a scoff. A getaway? Do you think that'll fix everything? Maybe try being less boring first. Her words cut deeper than she knew, or maybe she did. I started to feel like I was shrinking in my own home, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid her wrath. And yet, I kept convincing myself that things would get better, that this was just stress from work or the pressures of life. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it yet. The alarms were ringing, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to face what they meant. It was the last day of the year, and Emmy's company was hosting a New Year's Eve party at an upscale downtown hotel. She insisted I come along, even though these events weren't really my thing. "You'll finally get to meet my colleagues," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The ballroom was buzzing with energy. Waiters carrying trays of champagne, a live band playing smooth jazz, and clusters of coworkers laughing too loudly. Emmy looked stunning in her emerald green dress, her laugh infectious as she mingled effortlessly. Meanwhile, I hovered near the bar, feeling out of place. At some point, I noticed Emmy with one of her coworkers, a tall guy with perfect teeth and an annoyingly charming smile. His name was Ryan. She had mentioned him before in passing. They were standing a little too close, their laughter too intimate. I told myself it was nothing, but then it happened. As the band played a slow, romantic tune, I saw Ryan lean in. Emmy didn't pull away. Their lips met briefly, but the intent was unmistakable. My stomach turned to ice. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was the champagne or the dim lighting. But no, it happened. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Should I confront her? 'Cause a scene? I wasn't sure what to do. When she finally noticed me, her expression didn't waver. Instead, she approached casually, holding a flute of champagne, as if nothing had happened. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone light. "I saw you," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "With Ryan." Her smile faltered for a split second before she rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Jack. It was just a friendly kiss. Nothing more." "A friendly kiss?" I repeated, incredulous. "Yes," she said firmly, as if the matter was settled. "Don't make this a bigger deal than it is." I didn't press further that night. The combination of her dismissive tone and the public setting left me feeling powerless. But as we drove home in tense silence, my mind was racing with questions. Was it really nothing? Or was this the confirmation of something I'd been too afraid to acknowledge? As the clock struck midnight and fireworks lit up the sky, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at Emmy as she fell asleep without a care in the world. My heart was heavy with doubt, and for the first time I felt truly alone. The morning after the New Year's party, I woke up early. Emmy was still asleep, her breathing steady, as if the night before hadn't happened. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, replaying the kiss in my mind like a broken record. I wanted to believe her. Desperately, I did. But something about the way she dismissed it gnawed at me. By the time Emmy strolled into the kitchen, wearing her silk robe and sipping her coffee, I had mustered the courage to bring it up again. "About last night," I began, keeping my voice calm. "I can't shake what I saw." She sighed dramatically, setting her cup down with a clink. "Jack, I told you already. It was nothing. Ryan and I are friends. That's it." "But it didn't look like nothing," I pressed, my pulse quickening. "You were so close. It felt intimate." Her eyes narrowed, her tone turning icy. "Do you hear yourself? You sound paranoid. Do you even trust me?" Her words hit me like a slap. Did I trust her? I wasn't sure anymore. And yet, I found myself apologizing. "I'm sorry," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "Maybe I'm overthinking it." "That's exactly what you're doing," she said, her tone softening as she walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jack, you're my husband. I love you. You have nothing to worry about." She kissed my cheek, but it felt hollow, like a scripted performance. As the days passed, I tried to bury my doubts, but small signs began to surface, each one chipping away at my fragile trust. Emmy became more secretive. She started keeping her phone face down on the table, a habit she never had before. There were more late nights at the office, and her explanations always felt rehearsed, like she'd prepared for my questions. One evening, she was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen, my heart pounding. It was a text from Ryan. The preview read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't dare unlock her phone, but the words were enough to confirm my worst fears. When Emmy came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I acted as if nothing had happened. But inside I was spiraling. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. The way she'd leave the room to take certain calls. The perfume she started wearing, one she hadn't worn in years. And the subtle but noticeable distance between us. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but every time I tried, I hesitated. Was I being paranoid, as she said? Or was there really something she was hiding? Eventually, the tension became unbearable. I confided in my best friend, Marcus, over beers at a local pub. He listened intently as I recounted everything. The kiss, the text, her strange behavior. "Jack, you need to figure this out," Marcus said firmly. "You can't keep living like this." "I don't know how," I admitted. "I can't accuse her without proof. And what if I'm wrong?" "You're not wrong," he said, his voice steady. "But if you need proof, get it. Hire someone. Do whatever it takes. Just stop torturing yourself." The idea felt extreme, but Marcus was right. I couldn't live in limbo, questioning everything. That night, I searched online and found a private investigator. His name was Eric Monroe, and he specialized in cases like mine. When I made the call, my hands were trembling. I explained the situation, my voice thick with shame and uncertainty. "You're not alone in this," Eric said, his tone professional but kind. "I'll find out the truth, whatever it may be." Hanging up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I was finally taking action, but I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might uncover. Little did I know, the truth was darker than I could have imagined. The first time I met Eric Monroe, I felt like I was stepping into a noir film. His office was tucked away in a nondescript building downtown, the kind you'd pass by without a second glance. Inside, it was sparse but orderly. A desk stacked with case files, a corkboard covered in photos and notes, and the faint smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. Eric was a no-nonsense kind of guy, somewhere in his early 50s, with a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He listened as I poured out my suspicions, his pen moving steadily across a notepad. I told him about the kiss at the party, the text from Ryan, and all the small but significant changes in Emmy's behavior. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," I admitted. "But I need to know the truth, no matter how much it hurts." Eric nodded, his face unreadable. "I've seen this before," he said simply. "People like your wife, they're good at covering their tracks. But no one's perfect. If there's something going on, I'll find it." We agreed on a plan. Eric would follow Emmy discreetly, tracking her movements and documenting anything suspicious. He assured me that I wouldn't have to wait long for answers. The first few days were excruciating. I tried to go about my routine, work, errands, anything to keep my mind occupied, but the anxiety was relentless. Every time Emmy left the house, my heart sank. Was she going to see Ryan? What were they doing? One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, her lips curving into a small smile before she quickly placed it face down. My stomach churned, but I didn't say anything. Couldn't. A few days later, Eric called. "I've got something," he said, his voice clipped. "Can you meet me at my office tomorrow?" The next morning, I walked into his office feeling like a man on trial, awaiting his verdict. Eric didn't waste time. He handed me a manila folder, his expression serious. "Take a look," he said. Inside were photos, crisp, undeniable evidence. Emmy and Ryan walking out of a downtown hotel together, their hands brushing as they laughed. A shot of them entering the hotel lobby. Another of them leaving hours later, looking far too comfortable with each other. My chest tightened as I flipped through the images, each one a dagger to my heart. "There's more," Eric said, pulling out another sheet of paper. It was a copy of a hotel receipt. Emmy's name was on it, along with the date and time, late at night, the same night she had told me she was working late at the office. I stared at the evidence, my mind struggling to process it all. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was real. She had lied to me. She had betrayed me. "I'm sorry, Jack," Eric said quietly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I managed to say. I needed to know. Leaving Eric's office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a crushing sense of betrayal. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, had been living a double life. That night, as Emmy slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. But one thing was certain. Our marriage was built on lies, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. After seeing the photos and the receipt, the air in our home felt heavier. Every glance Emmy threw my way, every casual, "How was your day?" felt like a performance. I could barely look at her without the images flashing through my mind. Her hand brushing against Ryan's, their easy laughter as they entered the hotel. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure I could hold my ground when I did. Until then, I decided to observe to see if she would slip. It didn't take long. A week after I met with Eric, Emmy announced she had another late meeting. She was getting dressed in front of the mirror, applying a bold shade of lipstick she rarely wore. I watched her from the doorway, my arms crossed. A late meeting again? I asked, keeping my tone light. She glanced at me in the mirror, her expression unchanging. Yeah, it's budget season. We're all working overtime. I nodded slowly. That's a nice dress for a budget meeting. Her hand froze mid-application just for a second before she resumed. You know how these things are. We meet at the hotel downtown, grab some drinks afterward. It's a long night. The hotel. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to smile. Well, don't work too hard, I said. I won't, she replied, kissing me on the cheek before heading out the door. As soon as she left, I texted Eric. She's headed downtown again. Same hotel, I think. His reply came almost immediately. On it, I paced the living room for hours, the silence of the house almost unbearable. I tried distracting myself with TV, but every show felt hollow, every character's problems insignificant compared to mine. I thought about calling Marcus, but what could I say? That I was sitting at home while my wife was out with another man? Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Eric. The message was brief. She's there. Same guy. Leaving now. Photos coming soon. I felt the rage bubbling up, my fists clenching involuntarily. But I also felt powerless. No matter how much anger I felt, it wouldn't undo what she was doing. When Emmy came home around 1 a.m., I was still awake, sitting in the dim light of the living room. She seemed surprised to see me. You're up late, she said, her tone casual. Couldn't sleep? I replied, my voice flat. She walked over and leaned down to kiss me. I turned my face slightly, so her lips landed on my cheek. She paused, looking at me with a hint of suspicion. Is everything okay? She asked. I forced a tired smile. Yeah, just a long day. She nodded, heading upstairs to shower. I listened to the water running, my heart pounding with every passing second. When I finally received the photos from Eric the next morning, I didn't need to open them. I already knew what they would show. But now the mask was slipping. Emmy's lies were piling up, and I could feel the moment of confrontation looming closer. I wasn't sure how it would end, but I knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. The morning after Emmy's latest meeting, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee cup as if it held the answers I needed. The photos Eric had sent the night before were burned into my mind. Emmy and Ryan again. The hotel. Their bodies close, their faces lit with laughter. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a betrayal so deep that it felt like the ground beneath me had given way. Emmy entered the kitchen, her hair damp from her morning shower, humming softly to herself. She moved effortlessly, pouring a glass of orange juice and reaching for the bread to make toast. She looked so normal, so composed, as if nothing had happened. Good morning, she said cheerfully, glancing over at me. You're up early. I didn't reply. My grip tightened around the coffee mug. Are you okay? She asked, her smile faltering slightly. I'm fine, I said, forcing the words out. Just thinking. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. About what? I wanted to scream, to throw the photos on the table and demand an explanation. But instead I said, work. Lots to do today. She seemed satisfied with the answer, her guard dropping as she returned to making her breakfast. But something inside me snapped that day. I couldn't keep pretending. The weight of her lies was suffocating, and I knew I had to confront her. I just wasn't sure how. That evening I texted Marcus. I need to talk. Can you come over? Within an hour he was at my doorstep, a 6-pack of beer in hand. We sat in the living room and I laid it all out, the photos, the lies, everything. Jack, this isn't sustainable, Marcus said after a long silence. You need to confront her. You deserve answers. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But what if she denies it? What if she makes me feel crazy again? Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. Then you show her the proof. Don't let her manipulate you. You're not crazy, Jack. You're just someone who trusted the wrong person. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been blaming myself for weeks, doubting my own instincts, but the truth was undeniable. Emmy had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. When she came home that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. The photos Eric had sent me were spread out on the coffee table, a silent testimony to her betrayal. What's this? She asked, her voice sharp, her eyes darting to the images. You tell me, I said, my tone icy. She hesitated, her confident facade cracking for the first time. Jack, this isn't what it looks like. Don't insult me. I snapped, my voice rising. I've had a private investigator following you. I know everything, Emmy. The lies, the late nights, Ryan. You've been cheating on me. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she was speechless. But then her expression hardened. You had me followed? Are you serious? Do you have any idea how invasive that is? Invasive, I repeated, laughing bitterly. You're going to lecture me about invasion of privacy while you're sneaking around with another man? She crossed her arms, her voice turning defensive. It's not like that, Jack. Ryan and I, we're just friends. Friends. I picked up one of the photos and held it up to her face. Friends don't check into hotels together. Friends don't kiss each other at parties. Stop lying to me. Her silence was deafening. For the first time, Emmy looked genuinely cornered, her usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. But she didn't apologize. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, she turned it back on me. Maybe if you weren't so boring, she spat, I wouldn't have needed someone else to make me feel alive. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. I stared at her, stunned, as she stormed out of the room. The confrontation was over, but the damage was done. I sat alone in the quiet house, the weight of her betrayal settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I had finally confronted her, but instead of closure, I felt more lost than ever. The house felt like a tomb. Emmy had retreated to the bedroom after our fight, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I sat in the living room, staring at the photos still spread across the coffee table. Each one was a reminder of how much I'd lost, of how much I'd been deceived. Her words echoed in my mind. Maybe if you weren't so boring. Boring? Was that what she thought of me? I had built my life around her, worked hard to give us stability and a future. And this was my reward? I grabbed one of the beers Marcus had left behind and downed it in a few gulps, the bitterness matching my mood. My mind was racing, jumping between anger and sadness, betrayal and self-blame. I wanted to go upstairs to confront her again, but I knew it would only escalate. Instead, I stayed on the couch, replaying every moment of our relationship. The way we met at that small coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. How she'd laughed at one of my terrible jokes and called me endearingly awkward. How she'd looked at me on our wedding day, her eyes full of promise. Was it all a lie? The next morning, the tension was unbearable. Emmy came downstairs, her face expressionless, her movements mechanical as she made herself a cup of coffee. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word. I couldn't take the silence. Are we going to talk about this? I asked, my voice rough from lack of sleep. What's there to talk about? She replied coldly. How about the fact that you cheated on me? She sighed, finally turning to face me. You want the truth, Jack? Fine. Yes, I cheated. But it's not as simple as you think. Oh, really? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Enlighten me. She set her mug down with a clatter and crossed her arms. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? How suffocating this marriage has become? You're so predictable. Everything is routine with you. There's no passion, no excitement. Her words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, but she kept going. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said. Ryan, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel seen. And I didn't? I asked, my voice cracking. She hesitated, and in that moment, I saw the answer in her eyes. I felt the anger rising again, but this time it was mixed with something else. Despair. You could have talked to me, Emmy. You could have told me how you were feeling. Instead, you decided to destroy everything we built together. She looked away, her jaw tightening. Maybe I didn't think you'd listen. The conversation ended there, both of us retreating to our separate corners of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. That night, I texted Marcus again. She admitted it. I don't know what to do. His reply came quickly. You deserve better. Don't let her manipulate you. I wanted to believe him, but the truth was, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. My marriage was crumbling, and I didn't know if I had the strength to rebuild it, or if I even wanted to. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the empty space where Emmy used to sleep beside me, I realized something. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about the life I thought we had, the future I thought we were building. And now, I had to figure out how to move forward in a world where nothing felt certain. The days blurred together in a haze of anger, confusion, and sorrow. The silence in the house was suffocating. Emmy and I moved around each other like strangers, avoiding eye contact, exchanging only the most basic pleasantries, if that. But the truth hung in the air like a cloud, dark and oppressive. I had been trying to process everything, to figure out what to do next. I spoke with Marcus, seeking advice, but in truth, nothing felt like it would make the pain go away. The betrayal was too deep, and each time I looked at Emmy, I saw her as a stranger, someone who had crossed a line I never thought she would. But still, the question remained, what now? One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find her sitting on the couch. The TV was off, and for the first time in days, she wasn't on her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I paused at the doorway, the weight of everything crashing over me. I had no desire to talk, not really. But deep down, I knew it was inevitable. We couldn't keep pretending. I sat across from her, the space between us feeling like a chasm. I don't know what you want me to say, Emmy, I said, my voice raw. You've already told me everything you need to say. You've cheated. You've lied. She flinched at my words, but she didn't interrupt. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she said after a moment, her voice small, almost fragile. I need you to understand why I did it. I let out a humorless laugh. You've made yourself perfectly clear. You didn't feel alive anymore. You needed excitement. So you went and found it with someone else. Jack, it's not that simple. Her voice trembled, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so lost. I didn't know how to tell you I was unhappy. And you thought cheating was the answer? I said, my voice thick with disbelief. No, she exclaimed, her hands trembling. But Ryan, he gave me the attention I wasn't getting from you. He made me feel like I mattered. I mattered too, Emmy. The words came out sharper than I intended. I've spent my entire life building a future with you, but somewhere along the way, I became invisible to you. Her face crumpled, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I never meant for you to feel that way, but the truth is, I've been unhappy for a long time, Jack, and I didn't know how to fix it. I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing inside me. You didn't fix it by sleeping with another man. You destroyed it. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of the words hung between us, neither of us sure of what to say next. Finally, I broke the silence. I can't do this anymore, Emmy. I can't keep living in a house full of lies. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. Her eyes widened, and she reached out for my hand, but I pulled away, a wave of sadness washing over me. I love you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never stopped loving you. Please don't do this. I don't know if I can love you anymore, I said, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. You've taken everything from me. Trust, respect, the future we were supposed to have. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I need space. I need time to think. Emmy's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw the person I thought I knew, vulnerable, broken, afraid. But it didn't matter. I couldn't let her manipulate me with her tears. I walked out of the living room, the door to our bedroom closing behind me. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence deafening. As I sat alone in the dimly lit room, I realized that this was the end. The end of our marriage, the end of the life I thought I had, the end of the person I thought she was. And I knew, deep down, that this was the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. But it was necessary. For me. For my peace of mind. Emmy had made her choice. Now I had to make mine. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and confusion. I kept telling myself that I needed to make a decision, but the weight of it was suffocating. I had been so sure of everything before, so certain of my love for Emmy, our future together. But now I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Emmy had left the house for a few days, staying with a friend to give us both some space. I didn't know if she was truly sorry or if this was just another attempt at manipulation. But I had to think. I needed clarity. I spent most of my time on autopilot, going to work, getting through the motions, but every part of me was consumed by this crushing uncertainty. Should I forgive her? Could I? Or was it time to walk away, to take back control of my life? Marcus kept calling, checking in on me. "You can't keep doing this, Jack," he said one evening. "You deserve someone who respects you, someone who doesn't tear you apart like this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel strong enough to walk away, but the thought of losing Emmy, of losing everything we had built, was terrifying. But then, one evening, after hours of sitting alone in my living room, staring out the window, I realized something. Emmy's betrayal wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of the person I thought I was, the person I had been in this relationship. I wasn't the person who would settle for being lied to, for being made invisible. I wasn't the person who would keep accepting broken promises. I made my decision. I called Emmy that evening. My heart was racing, but my mind was made up. "We need to talk," I said, trying to sound calm, though I felt anything but. She arrived a few hours later, her face strained, her eyes red, as if she had been crying. I knew the moment she walked through the door that she was still holding on to hope. Hope that somehow we could fix everything. But I had reached the breaking point. She sat down on the couch across from me, her posture tense. "Jack, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." I didn't let her finish. "I can't do this anymore, Emmy." My words felt like they were carved from stone, unyielding. "I've been holding on for too long. But you've shown me who you really are, and I can't pretend I don't see it." Her eyes widened, and she reached out as if to touch my hand, but I pulled away. The contact between us felt foreign now, like something broken that could never be fixed. "I know I've messed up," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Jack. Please, just give me a chance." I shook my head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you messing up. This is about everything. You broke my trust. You broke us." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. Nothing she could say would change the reality of what had happened. "I'm sorry, Emmy, but I can't keep doing this. I'm done," I said, the finality of my words hanging in the air like a death sentence. She stared at me for a long moment, as if expecting me to take it back. But I didn't. Finally, she stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted this to happen, Jack. I really didn't." "I know," I replied softly, "but it's happened, and I need to let go." She left shortly after that, her departure marking the end of everything. As I stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind, I felt a mixture of relief and devastation. It was over, but the healing had only just begun. The days after Emmy left felt surreal. I spent most of my time in the silence of our empty house, the walls that once held our laughter now echoing with the weight of everything we had lost. It felt as if the life I had known was slipping away from me, piece by piece, until all that remained was an empty shell of what could have been. The first night alone was the hardest. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape the thoughts racing through my mind. I kept replaying every moment, every kiss, every argument, every lie, and the crushing realization that it had all been for nothing. I tried to keep busy, going to work, seeing Marcus, filling my days with anything that could distract me from the emptiness that threatened to consume me. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't just the loss of Emmy. It was the loss of myself, the person I had been in that relationship. The man who believed in love, in commitment, in a future with someone by his side. Marcus could see it in my eyes. "You need to let go, Jack," he said one evening as we sat at the bar, nursing drinks. "You're holding onto the past, and it's tearing you apart." "I know," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "But it's so hard. I gave everything to her. I thought we were building something real." "You were," Marcus said. "But sometimes things aren't meant to last. And that's okay. You're stronger than this, Jack. You'll find your way again." His words were a lifeline, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to rebuild my life when the foundation I had built it on had crumbled beneath me. But slowly, over time, I began to realize something. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep letting Emmy's betrayal define who I was. I had to find a way to heal, to move forward, and to reclaim my life. It wasn't easy. There were nights I still cried myself to sleep, moments when I wanted to pick up the phone and call her, to ask her to come back. But I knew, deep down, that I was better off without her. I wasn't the same person I had been when we first met. I had learned so much about myself, about my worth, and about the strength I never knew I had. I just had to trust that, in time, the pain would fade. And slowly, it did. It's funny how life works. Just when you think you've lost everything, the universe somehow finds a way to show you that there's more ahead, if you're willing to look for it. The first few months after Emmy left were grueling, but in hindsight, I realized they were necessary. I had to confront the pain, sit with it, and allow myself to feel everything. The rage, the sadness, the loneliness, before I could even begin to heal. Marcus had been my rock through all of it. He'd listened to me rant, offered advice, and even dragged me out when I wanted to stay locked in my house. But even he couldn't pull me out of the darkness alone. One day, I decided to take a long walk through the park near my apartment. The weather was starting to turn warmer, the sun shining brightly as people jogged past me or sat on benches reading. It felt like the world was moving on, and I was standing still, stuck in the past. I found a quiet spot by the lake, watching the water ripple gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. As I sat there, something inside me shifted. It was a quiet realization, almost like a whisper. I'm not broken. I had been so focused on what I lost that I hadn't seen how much I had left. I had a job I loved. I had friends who cared about me. And most importantly, I had my own strength, something I had forgotten in the midst of my heartache. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders, even if just a little. I wasn't the same person I was before all this happened, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe I was stronger now, wiser, more aware of what I truly needed in life. It was time to rebuild, to start over, not just with a new chapter, but with a whole new perspective. The next few weeks, I started small. I reconnected with old friends, joined a new gym, and focused on my career. I had to remind myself that I was worthy of happiness, that I was capable of more than I had ever realized. And then, just when I thought I had finally found my footing, something unexpected happened. I met someone new. Her name was Claire. We met at a mutual friends gathering, and from the moment we started talking, I felt something click. She wasn't like Emmy. She didn't need to be. She was kind, easygoing, and had a laugh that made me feel like everything was going to be okay. At first, I didn't want to open myself up again. I had been burned so badly by Emmy's betrayal. The idea of trusting someone new was terrifying. But Claire was different. She didn't rush me. She didn't push. She just let me be myself. It was slow, gentle, but it felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in a long while, I began to believe that maybe love wasn't something to be feared. Maybe it was something to be embraced. I wasn't ready to jump into another relationship right away, But with Claire, it felt like I could finally take my time. There was no rush, no pressure. We just enjoyed each other's company, slowly building something new, something I hadn't thought I'd be able to find again. I wasn't whole yet. I was still healing, still learning to trust myself again. But with Claire, I saw the possibility of a future I could build for myself, with someone who valued me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. Time moved faster than I expected. Slowly, I began to piece my life back together. I focused on work, spent time with friends, and kept pushing myself to grow. There were days when the loneliness crept in, but I didn't let it consume me. Claire and I continued to spend time together, but I remained cautious. I didn't want to rush anything. Still, I couldn't ignore the way she made me feel, like I wasn't alone anymore. One evening, we went for a walk, and as we stood by the lake, she took my hand. "Jack," she said softly, "I'm really glad we met." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a future ahead of me. As I sat by the lake, watching the colors of the sunset spill across the horizon, something in me finally clicked. The weight that had been holding me back, whether it was the anger, the sorrow, or the fear of moving forward, had finally lifted. The journey I'd been on, through heartbreak and loss, was not one I would wish on anyone. But I could see now that it had shaped me into someone different, someone stronger, and perhaps even wiser. The person I was before Emmy left seemed like a distant memory now. And in a way, that was okay. I had to let go of the past to make room for the future. It wasn't about forgetting, but about healing, about realizing that I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. I had built my life around someone else's actions for so long, and now I was learning how to rebuild it for myself. In Claire, I saw a future, but not a rushed one. The trust was slow, like a flower blossoming over time. I knew I was still healing, still figuring things out. But with her, I didn't feel the need to rush. I could take my time, focus on myself, and see where it led. She wasn't there to replace Emmy, and that was a good thing. I didn't need someone to erase the past. I needed someone who accepted me for who I was now, someone who respected my pace, my healing. If you're watching this, I want you to know that no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're in the middle of a breakup, recovering from a betrayal, or simply struggling with the weight of life, I want you to remember this: you are not alone. Life can be hard. People can disappoint us, and sometimes the ones we trust the most can break us. But that doesn't mean we have to stay broken. It's okay to grieve, to feel lost, but never forget that you have the strength to rebuild, to stand up, and to start again. There's always hope, even in the darkest moments. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. Sometimes it's just about taking that first step. And before you know it, you'll find yourself looking back, seeing how far you've come. If you're going through something similar, or if this story resonated with you in some way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below. Share your experiences, your thoughts on love, heartbreak, and healing. If this story gave you any kind of insight or comfort, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Remember, you're stronger than you think. And there's always something beautiful ahead, even if you can't see it yet. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you a little peace, just as sharing it has helped me find my own. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and always keep moving forward.